Hello everyone and welcome back. Today, I want to tell you a story. It's not like the ones I usually tell. This story is true. It happened to me. And to be honest, just recounting it makes my chest feel heavy. It all started in the summer I turned 22. Like so many other European students after graduation, my three best friends, Chloe, Sam, Liam, and I, decided to do what we've been dreaming of for years, a backpacking trip across the continent. We had saved every euro, meticulously planned our train routes, and our spirits couldn't have been higher. We did the usual circuit, the Eiffel Tower in Paris, the Colosseum in Rome, the Berlin Wall. It was incredible, but after about a month, we started to get a little tired of the big cities and the tourist crowds. We were craving something more authentic, a unique experience that not everyone gets. It was Chloe, always the one digging for obscure things online, who found it, a tiny village called Ethelgard, tucked away in a remote valley somewhere in Eastern Europe. According to an old travel blog she'd found, this village hosts a festival called the Blood Moon Festival, an event that only happened once every 10 years. It was described as a truly special cultural experience, a chance to see an ancient Europe that still existed. The idea immediately captivated us. Getting off the beaten path. It was exactly what we were looking for. We didn't think much of it. It was just another stop on our adventure, a cool story to tell later. We had no idea that decision would change everything. The journey to Ethelgard was an omen in itself. No trains went there. We had to take a rickety old bus from the nearest city, a 6-hour ride on winding, bumpy mountain roads. The further we went into the wilderness, the weaker our phone signals became until they died completely. When the bus finally stopped at the edge of a dense forest and the driver pointed to a small dirt trail, saying it was the only way into the village, a tiny seed of unease started to grow in me. But Chloe was thrilled, claiming this was a real adventure. We shouldered our packs and started walking. It took us nearly an hour through the unervingly silent forest before we saw it. Ethelgard was nestled in a valley, looking exactly like a village out of fairy tale. Wooden houses with mossy roofs, cobblestone paths, and a small stream running through it. But something was off. It was too quiet. There were no kids playing, no dogs barking, no sound of daily life. As we entered the villagers started emerging from their homes. They wore simple, traditional clothes, and all of them, every single one, stopped and stared at us. Their smiles were wide, but their eyes were vacant, almost lifeless. An old man, who introduced himself as the village elder, Klaus, came out to greet us. He said they had been expecting us, that we were the guests of honor for the festival. Their hospitality was so intense it was suffocating. They led us to the only inn in the village, where everything was clean and tidy, yet felt like it hadn't been occupied in years. That night, Liam whispered to me that he hadn't seen any children in the village. I brushed it off, saying they were probably in bed early. But deep down, I felt it too. The normality here was a facade, and we had just started to scratch the surface. The escalation didn't happen suddenly. It was more like a slow, creeping fever. The next evening, the villagers threw a welcome feast for us. They set up a long table in the village square, laden with dishes we'd never seen before. Huge slabs of roasted meat, strangely shaped vegetables, and a drink that was a deep red like wine but had an earthy, metallic taste. The strangest part was that none of the villagers ate or drank. They just sat there, watching us with the same empty smiles, urging us to have more, to drink more. Sam, being the easygoing one, dug in enthusiastically, but Liam and I only dared to take a few bites. The meat had a strange, slightly coppery aftertaste I couldn't place. Chloe, despite trying to be cheerful, also ate sparingly. We felt like we were on a stage, and the entire village was our audience. The next morning, we decided to try and walk out of the village, maybe to find the trail from yesterday. But strangely, we couldn't find it. We walked the perimeter of the valley, but every path seemed to loop back to the village. The feeling of being isolated started to become terrifyingly real. When we asked Elder Klaus about the path, he just smiled and told us not to worry, that everything we needed was here, and that we should be preparing for the festival night. That's when the real fear began to take root. That afternoon, Klaus, and a few women brought us our festival attire. They were made of a coarse, heavy fabric, embroidered with strange symbols we didn't understand. They told us it was a great honor. As we put them on, I felt like I was being dressed in someone else's clothes, for a role I was destined to play. Our paranoia peaked on the third night. Liam couldn't take it anymore. He said he felt like a prisoner and was determined to find a way out on his own. While everyone was preparing for the first ceremonies in the square, Liam slipped into Elder Klaus's house, hoping to find a map or something similar. A long while later, he came back to the inn, his face pale as a sheet, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He didn't say anything, just motioned for us to follow him to the inn cellar, where we stored our gear. In a dark corner behind some old barrels, he showed us a small wooden door we hadn't noticed before. Liam tremblingly pulled it open. It wasn't an escape route. It was a storage room. Inside were dozens, maybe hundreds of backpacks of all styles and colors, from old, faded ones from the 80s and 90s to more modern ones. Next to them were piles of cameras, passports from all over the world, and hiking boots. All of it was covered in a thick layer of dust, silent as tombstones. We were stunned. Every backpack was a traveler, a group of friends just like us, who had come here looking for an authentic experience. And they never left. Just then, we heard the deep, rhythmic beat of a drum starting up from the village square. The night of the Blood Moon Festival had truly begun, and we suddenly realized we weren't the guests of honor. We were the main course. The cellar door flew open. Elder Klaus stood there, but the hospitable smile was gone. In its place was a primal hunger, and in the dim light, we swore his eyes and the eyes of the villagers behind him were glowing with a faint red light. No words were spoken. The silence was more terrifying than any scream. Our reaction was pure primal instinct. Fight or flight. Sam, the biggest and strongest of us, let out a roar and charged forward, throwing his full weight into Klaus and two other men, creating a moment of chaotic opportunity. "Run!" he yelled, his voice cracking with fear and adrenaline. It was the last time we ever heard his voice. Chloe and Liam didn't hesitate, scrambling towards a small ventilation window high on the wall we hadn't paid attention to before. I started to go after Sam, but a bony hand grabbed my ankle. I fell to the floor, and for a second, I looked directly into the eyes of one of the village women. There was no life there anymore, just an endless hunger. I kicked wildly at her face and crawled frantically towards the window. Liam had already smashed it and was pulling himself through, with Chloe right behind him. I felt fingers clawing at my back as I used every last ounce of strength to push my body through the narrow opening, tearing my skin. Once all three of us were outside in the cold night air, we risked a single glance back. The moon had turned a sickening shade of blood red, bathing the valley in an eerie glow. In the square, we saw the villagers dragging a limp body toward a large, altar-like rock. It was Sam, and we knew our absolute worst nightmare had just come true. We ran. We ran without direction, a frantic, blind sprint into the pitch-black forest, never daring to look back. The sound of the drums and the strange festival chants seemed to follow us for a long time before finally fading into the distance. Branches tore at our clothes and skin. We fell more times than I can count, but we didn't stop. Terror gave us a strength we didn't know we possessed. We only stopped when the first rays of dawn pierced through the trees, and we collapsed from exhaustion onto a dirt track. A few hours later, a logging truck driver found us. He looked at three tattered, hysterical kids and probably thought we were on drugs. We tried to explain, to tell the story in frantic, broken pieces, but he just silently drove us to the nearest police station. They took our statements. They were sympathetic, but we could see the disbelief in their eyes. A search party was sent out, but 2 days later, they came back with a report that made our blood run cold. They found the valley, but it was empty. There was no village of Ethelgard, no houses, no inn, no town square, and certainly no cellar full of backpacks, just wild grass and trees. Our story was dismissed as a shared hallucination, a case of food poisoning, or perhaps some hallucinogenic mushroom we'd ingested from the forest. Sam was officially declared a missing person. There was no explanation. There was no closure. We went home, but a part of us died in that valley. Sometimes on quiet nights, I can still hear the faint, rhythmic drumming. And even now, whenever the moon is full, I don't dare look at the sky for too long, because I'm afraid that in its light, I'll see the color red again. Hello, everyone. For those of you who are new to my channel, my name is Alara. I'm a writer. It's my job to create worlds, to create characters, and to arrange messy words into an orderly story. And to be honest, my life is arranged just as perfectly. I live in an apartment overlooking a canal in Amsterdam, a place that is always clean, tidy, and quiet. My days run on an almost unchanging schedule. Wake up at 6, write for 4 hours, take a walk, answer emails, then write again. My second novel was just published to critical acclaim. On paper, I am living the life many people dream of. Everything is in its proper place. This order, this control, it's not just a preference. It's a defense mechanism. I've built these walls around myself carefully over the last 10 years, brick by brick, to make sure nothing from the past can creep in. I believed I had succeeded. I believe I was safe in the quiet fortress I had created. My life, like the pages I write, had been meticulously edited to remove any unpredictable elements. It was pleasant, it was safe, and it was intentionally, purposefully boring. I just didn't know that someone else was holding a red pen, ready to write all over my story. It started on a Tuesday afternoon, a typical gray, damp Amsterdam day. I was on a break, making myself a cup of tea, when the buzzer rang. The postman handed me a small package, a plain brown cardboard box with no return address. I assumed it was a proof copy of a book from my publisher or a gift from a fan. Nothing out of the ordinary. I put it on the kitchen counter and almost forgot about it until the evening. After I'd finished my work, I finally opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of tissue paper, was a friendship bracelet. It was clumsily braided from faded blue and silver threads, and I recognized it instantly. 10 years had passed, but I could still feel the texture of those threads under my fingers. Maya had made it for me. We were 15, sitting by the forbidden lake on a humid summer afternoon, promising we'd be best friends forever. A cold chill ran down my spine, a strange mix of painful nostalgia and utter confusion. Maya had vanished without a trace that autumn. Who could possibly have this? And why send it to me now? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe one of our old friends found it while cleaning out old things. Maybe Maya's mother sent it, though we hadn't spoken in years. It was weird, but not impossible. I put the bracelet in the bottom drawer of my dresser, pushed it to the very back, and tried to get on with my evening. But for the first time in years, the order of my world had been disrupted by something I couldn't control. A week passed. I had almost convinced myself the bracelet was just a strange coincidence. But then the second box arrived. Identical to the first, no return address. This time, my heart beat faster as I opened it. Inside was a worn, dog-eared paperback novel, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. It was Maya's favorite book. As I flipped through the pages, I saw her notes in the margins, written in her distinctive, slanted handwriting. Her thoughts, her questions, the parts she had underlined. This wasn't just any copy. This was her copy, the one she carried everywhere. All rational explanations began to evaporate. No one had this but Maya. The unease turned to dread. Someone didn't just know about me and Maya. They had her things. I started to feel watched. I checked the locks on my door multiple times before bed. The sound of canal boats outside my window was no longer comforting, but a warning. My sleep was fractured by dreams of the old days, of Maya's laugh, and of the terrifying silence after she was gone. A week later, the third box came. I was shaking as I opened it. Inside was a disposable camera, the cheap kind we use as teenagers. There was a small note attached, with only one word on it: develop. The next day, with a growing sense of horror, I took it to an old photo lab. The man behind the counter gave me a strange look when I said I wanted to develop such an old film. When I returned to pick up the photos, my hands were slick with sweat. The first few pictures were innocent. Me and Maya, giggling for the camera, making silly faces. Then the setting changed. We were at the old quarry at the edge of town, the one we were forbidden to go to. The photos got darker. Our smiles were gone. The very last picture was a close-up of Maya's face. She wasn't looking at the camera, but at something just out of frame, and on her face was an expression I had never forgotten. It was pure, absolute fear. And then the roll ended. Whoever was sending these boxes didn't just know what happened. They were there, and they wanted me to know it. My orderly life had completely shattered. I wasn't writing anymore. My apartment no longer felt like a sanctuary, but a cage. I was haunted by the question, who were they, and what did they want from me after all this time? I didn't leave my apartment for 3 days. I unplugged my phone, drew the curtains tight across every window. But I knew sooner or later it would come, and then it did. A soft knock on the door this time, not the buzzer. An intimate, terrifying knock. The fourth and final package was sitting on my doorstep. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pick it up. This time, there was no tissue paper inside. There were only 2 things. The first was an old hiking boot, caked in dried mud. I knew it instantly. It was Maya's, the one she'd been wearing that day at the quarry. The smell of damp earth and 10-year-old decay seemed to fill my pristine apartment. The other object made the air leave my lungs. It was a silver chain with a small, heart-shaped locket. My locket, the one I had dropped and thought I'd lost forever at the quarry that day. He wasn't just there. He was close. He saw everything. Taped inside of the box's lid was a small clipping from an old newspaper with a single handwritten line scrawled underneath it. The line wasn't a threat. It was a question. I know you saw what happened. Why did you run? The exact moment I finished reading the question, the doorbell rang. A loud, piercing chime in the silence of my apartment. I shuffled to the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked through the peephole. Standing in the hallway was a man. Not a monster, not a shadow. Just an old man, looking like a janitor or a groundskeeper, with a blank face. He wasn't looking at the door, but up directly into the peephole, as if he knew I was right there, and he smiled. A small, almost sympathetic smile. He didn't need to break down the door. He was already inside my head. I didn't open the door. I sat huddled on the floor, my back against it, until I heard his footsteps walk away. I never saw him again. The boxes stopped coming. The next day, I called the police. I tried to explain everything, my voice shaky and incoherent. They came, they looked at the boxes, they took notes. But what could they do? There was no direct threat, no sign of a break-in. To them, it was just a collection of strange old items and a woman suffering from nervous exhaustion. They politely suggested I should see a professional to talk to. They left me alone with the objects, with the truth. I moved out of that apartment. I sold most of my furniture, trying to shed anything that could be a reminder of those terrible days. But you can't run away from your own memory. The sender had achieved his goal. He didn't want to harm me physically. He wanted to shatter the fortress I had spent a decade building around myself. He wanted to force me to remember hiding behind a rock, trembling, watching Maya argue with a man I didn't recognize, to remember turning and running when he grabbed her arm. I ran and never looked back. The sender of the boxes is gone, but now the memories are inside me. They are no longer locked away in dark drawers. They are on display. They are my own boxes, and I can never, ever throw them away. Hello, everyone. My name is Kale, and I'm a remembrance detective. Sounds grand, doesn't it? In the Hollow flicks, we're portrayed as wizards of the mind, people who can walk into the memories of the dead to find the truth. The reality is much more boring. My job mostly consists of sitting in a dark, cold room, staring at three-dimensional fragments of someone's last hours. It's not a clean river of memory. It's more like watching a damaged videotape, full of glitches, static, and gaps. We call it neural noise, the final echoes of a dying brain. Most cases are trivial. Insurance fraud, family disputes, drunken bad decisions. I watch their final hours, look for a detail, a face, a forgotten number, then I write my report. It's repetitive and a bit soulless. You have to keep a certain distance, or those ghosts of the past will follow you home. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've seen more than anyone should, and I've learned the golden rule. Never fully trust a record. Memory is a malleable thing, warped by fear, regret, or simply the brain's natural decay. My job is to find the truth in that mess. It's a job, nothing more. A normal job in a world that's anything but. Everything changed on a Wednesday morning. On a rainy day, just like any other. I had just closed a case on an embezzling accountant who panicked and ended his own life. Nothing surprising. I was about to head home when my captain, Eva Rostova, called me into her office. Her expression was more serious than usual. "We got a case, Cale," she said, pushing a file across the metal desk. "And it's a big one. The victim was Dr. Eris Thorne. I didn't need the file to know who he was. The whole city did. Eris Thorne was a pioneer, the father of remembrance technology. It was his mind that created the very machine I used every day. He was found dead in his private lab, a single gunshot to the chest. The scene was clean, no sign of a struggle, no trace of a break-in. A perfect suicide. Only one problem," Rostova continued, lacing her fingers together. "When our tech team tried to access his record, they ran into a problem. The signal is extremely unstable, abnormally high neural noise. It's almost like a firewall is blocking us." I raised an eyebrow. That was absurd. The father of the tech was the one person the tech couldn't get a clear read on. Maybe it's his experimental implants. I guessed. Rostova nodded, but she didn't look convinced. "Maybe, or maybe it's something else. I want you at the scene. See if anything feels off. Anything at all." That was the first anomaly. A small detail, a technical glitch. But on a case involving Eris Thorne, nothing was a coincidence. Thorne's lab was on the top floor of a glass and steel tower overlooking the gray city. It was just as Rostova said, sterilely clean. Thorne was in his chair, his body cold. He looked strangely peaceful. I walked the perimeter, getting a feel for the room. Nothing was out of place, which was exactly what felt wrong. It was too perfect. Then I saw it. On Thorne's desk, amongst the digital slates, was an old book, a real paper book, a rarity these days. It was a copy of Greek mythology. The book was open to a page titled Lethe, the mythological river of forgetfulness, where souls drank to forget their pasts. A strange coincidence. For the next few days, my team and I worked tirelessly to stabilize Thorne's record. My technicians struggled. They said his memory architecture was like a labyrinth, with firewalls and hidden encryption. While they worked, I started digging into Thorne's life. I interviewed his colleagues. They said that in his final months, Thorne had become paranoid. He kept talking about a ghost in the machine, a theoretical loophole that would allow someone to edit another person's memories before they could be recorded. He called his secret project Project Lethe. My unease grew. Then I found it buried deep in Thorne's personal server, an encrypted file with my name on it. "Cale, why did the most famous scientist in the world have a secret file on a low-level detective like me?" After a massive effort, my team finally broke through. They had stabilized the last 5 minutes of Thorne's life. "It's not perfect, Cale," my lead tech, Jenna, warned. "There's still a lot of noise, but it's all we've got." I stepped into the chronoscope chamber. The lights dimmed, and a hologram began to form around me. I was in Thorne's lab, looking through his eyes. He was arguing with someone. The figure was obscured in shadow, their voice distorted by neural noise. "You can't do this," Thorne said, his voice trembling. "It will ruin everything." The distorted voice replied, "It's the price of progress." Then, the figure stepped into the light. He was wearing the same remembrance detective uniform as me. He had my height, my build, and when he lifted his head, my heart stopped. The face, calm and cold, staring back at Thorne. It was my own face. I saw my own hand, in Thorne's memory, raise a gun, and then the record ended in a roar of static. I staggered out of the chronoscope chamber, the world tilting around me. The sound of static was still screaming in my ears. "Cale, are you okay?" Jenna's voice was distant. but I couldn't answer. I had seen myself. I had seen myself as a murderer. How was that possible? I was at home that night, alone, and I had activity logs to prove it. But the record never lies, does it? That's what we were always taught. Before I could even begin to process my chaotic thoughts, a piercing siren blared throughout the precinct. Red lights flashed across the walls, and on the main screen in the center of the lab, a city-wide alert appeared. It was my face under the words, "Wanted, Inspector Kale, sought for the murder of Dr. Eris Thorne. Subject is armed and extremely dangerous." The lab doors burst open. Captain Rostova and a tactical team stormed in, their weapons aimed directly at me. "Kale, don't move," Rostova yelled, her face a mask of fury and betrayal. "We just received a clean copy of the record. Clear as day. We saw what you did." I understood instantly. It was a setup. The glitchy record I had seen was just a rough draft, a cruel joke. Someone had held on to a clean version, a perfect cut with no contradictions, and sent it system-wide the moment I was finished. They wanted me to be the first to see it, to plant doubt in my own mind before the trap snapped shut. There was no time to explain. Who would believe one man against the evidence of a victim's own memory? Survival instinct took over. I flipped the heavy console table towards them, creating a moment of chaos. As they stumbled, I dove for the service hatch I knew about from my years on the force. I was running from my own colleagues, for my own life, hunted for a crime I didn't commit, but that my own face had perpetrated. Now I am a ghost. I live in the damp alleyways and forgotten tenements of the city's lower levels, where the police surveillance network can't easily reach. I become one of the faceless people I used to hunt. Every face in a crowd is a potential enemy. Every siren makes my heart seize. They didn't just take my name. They took my face and turned it into the mask of a killer. In the lonely fear, I started to connect the pieces. Project Lethe, Thorne's warnings, the secret file with my name on it. Thorne hadn't been investigating me. He had discovered the conspiracy. He knew someone had perfected memory editing technology, and for some reason, they had chosen me as their scapegoat. They must have been watching me for months, collecting my biometric data, copying my voice and mannerisms to create a perfect digital puppet. Thorne's murder wasn't just to silence him. It was a product launch, a terrifying demonstration of power, the ability to shape reality itself. Who was behind it? A corporation? A shadow government agency? I don't know, but I know one thing. They made one mistake. They chose a man who knows how the system works, a man who knows how to disappear. My old life is over, but a new mission has begun. They took my past and turned it into a lie. Now, I have to fight in the shadows, not to find the truth in others' memories, but to reclaim my own.